Welcome to Lesson 1 in Unit 14, Bugs and Blooms. In this lesson, students will work to answer the question, where do flowers come from? In this lesson, students investigate life cycles. They plant bean seeds and observe the different stages of growth. Students figure out that plants have a standard life cycle that begins with a seed and ends with the death of a plant. Students are introduced to the anchoring phenomenon by listening to a story and asking questions about why a bee is on a flower. There are several opportunities for ELA, math, and social studies cross-curricular connections throughout the lesson. You can look for specific standard connections in the Unit 14 Teacher Guide. This lesson will take approximately 4 days to complete. You'll start the unit and the engage portion of this lesson by introducing the anchoring phenomenon. You'll ask students what they know about insects and invite them to share any responses. Be sure to see the noted opportunity to attend to equity, should the provided anchoring phenomenon not be compelling for your students. Students will find the anchoring phenomenon more compelling if they can connect to it personally. If you want to change the anchoring phenomenon for your context, keep the following questions in mind. Is it going to be relevant to my students' lives and/or particularly engaging to them? Is it going to motivate students to want to explain how insects pollinate flowers, how animals work in social groups to survive, the life cycle of plants and/or animals, and inherited and environmental traits? You'll then read Evelyn the Adventurous Entomologist, the true story of a world-traveling bug hunter, as a class. Be sure to use the Read Aloud Guide for discussion questions and key ideas. You can post the Entomologist vocabulary card. You'll then show students the common characteristics among insects and post the insect vocabulary card. You'll show students the image of the honeybee visiting a flower and ask about their experiences with bees and other insects. You'll pass out the silk flowers from the kit to students and ask what they notice about them and why they think a bee would visit a flower. You'll then have students use their Insect on a Flower student journal page to draw a picture making a prediction about why they think the bee is visiting the flower. After students have completed their drawing, you'll allow them to turn and talk to share their ideas about why the bee is visiting the flower. You'll have a few students share their ideas and record them and/or draw them on a piece of chart paper and revisit these ideas as you move through Section 1 of the unit. You'll ask students what they wonder about the flowers and the bees and have them record initial questions based on their observations on Post-it notes, writing one question per Post-it. The goal is to support students to ask multiple questions related to the phenomenon that they can use science to explain. Once students have their questions, you will guide them in creating categories for their questions on the driving question board using the provided steps. Do not answer questions at this time or correct student thinking. They will explore their questions and explain this anchoring phenomenon throughout the unit. For example, if a student says something incorrect, you can say, "How could we figure that out?" Here are some examples of driving question boards from other K-5 units. They depict the students' questions in categories, some along with drawn models from the unit. Some driving question boards are simple lists of questions or groups of sticky notes posted on chart paper. Teacher and students can manipulate and move around questions and label categories together. For the Explore portion, you'll place students into groups and provide each group with 2 different beans from the MySci kit and a hand lens. You'll ask them questions about what they notice about the beans and the similarities and differences they see. You'll allow students to turn and talk about their observations. You can record their observations on the board as they share. You can post and discuss the seed vocabulary card. You'll then give each group of students 2 peat pots filled with soil and 2 beans of the same type. Before planting, you'll have students draw their seeds on the plant observation and recording student journal page. See the tutorial slides for photos and detailed instructions for the planting activity. You'll ask students to make predictions about their plants, and once they sprout, measure them, water them daily, and record their observations in the Plant Observation and Recording student journal page. In the Explain portion of the lesson, students will engage in a class discussion. You'll invite students to gather and analyze their observations and learning from the activity. You'll use the provided questions to guide the discussion around where do flowers come from? The goal of this class discussion is to have students analyze and interpret the data they have collected by observing the plants each day, noticing the amount and type of growth, and identifying the stages of a plant's life cycle. This discussion will be continued in the Elaborate portion. You'll use the discussion to create the Lesson 1 summary chart. From the discussion, students should understand that plants have a life cycle. They start out as seeds, germinate into seedlings, then young plants, then adult plants, and then they die. During the discussion, you'll display and read aloud the MySci Science book, Plant Life Cycles. Throughout the reading and summary chart discussion, several vocabulary words and key ideas will be introduced, including life cycle, organism, sprout, seedling, germination, flower, reproduction, pollen, pollination, and pattern. As the seeds grow, you'll use the Elaborate portion to allow the students to turn and talk about their understanding of the plant life cycle and the evidence that supports their thinking. You'll ask them questions about the plant's similarities and differences and their observations of their life cycles. During the discussion, you can post the death and model vocabulary cards. For the Evaluate portion, you'll have the students use the Life Cycle of a Bean student journal page to draw what each of the stages of growth looks like. If students were not able to see the whole life cycle with their plants, you can show them a video of the poppy seed flower. Students can draw the life cycle using what they see in the video. To support student sense-making across the unit, orient them back to the driving question board. Ask, what did we learn about where flowers come from? And what new questions do we have? By the end of this lesson, students will have developed a model that demonstrates the life cycle of plants. In Lesson 2, students will investigate how the honeybee helps the flowers. For more information about this unit, visit myscipartners.com.